world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is May 29th, 2014. Took the past couple days off. Had some interesting interviews. Got a chance to actually sit down yesterday with the son of CIA spy and Watergate burglar E. Howard Hunt, St. John Hunt. Talked to him for over 4.5 hours. Got to look him in the eyes as he was talking, and I can tell you he's the real deal as far as I'm concerned. And I'll be getting into that in a later episodes. But yes, very interesting. So I took a couple days off of going live this week to get some, like I said, interesting interviews done. So I'll be getting into that on further shows, but I don't want to waste any time tonight. Tonight's broadcast is very, very special to me, near and dear to my heart. I've talked about this before, and the anniversary is actually coming up in about a week, a little over a week. And I have another crew member from this ship coming on next week, but I wanted to get as many of them on before the anniversary comes up. I'm going to end up trying to get a few on afterwards, but because I know a lot of them are busy around this time of year with interviews. But I wanted to get at least 2 of the surviving crew members of the U.S.S. Liberty on my broadcast this year. In past years, you've heard Richard Larry Weaver. He's been on the broadcast before. He'll be coming on again next week. But tonight, for the first time, I welcome another survivor of the U.S.S. Liberty. His name is Ernie Gallo. Now, for those of you that do not know what the Liberty is, tonight you're going to hear not from me bloviating and going off and talking about it for 15 or 20 minutes. No, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Larry Weaver. I'm just going to, I'll introduce Ernie in a minute, and I'm just going to shut up and let him talk. Because he's a piece of history. He's somebody who deserves to have his story told and his fellow shipmates' stories told. Something that's been whitewashed. If you don't know what the USS Liberty is, you can go on YouTube and look up the movie Loss of Liberty, or type in USS Liberty, and there'll be 2 documentaries, one from the BBC and a movie called Loss of Liberty. I suggest you watch both of them. But also listen to the interviews that you will hear, and listen to what Ernie has to say. He's also got a book. I'm going to make him plug his book repeatedly tonight and tell you all where you can get it. It's called Liberty Injustices, A Survivor's Account of American Bigotry. Liberty, Injustices, a survivor's account of American bigotry. Ernie's on the ADL's list of bad people. He's anti-Semitic because he says Israel attacked them on purpose. It was clearly a mistake, but he must not like Jews. Worst argument I've ever heard. But I expect nothing less from Mark Potok and the crew over at the ADL. So without wasting any more time, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring to the airwaves a piece of living history, a surviving member of the U.S.S. Liberty, which was attacked unprovoked and intentionally by Israel on June 8th, 1967, during the Six-Day War, on the fourth day of the Six-Day War. And they meant to sink it. And by the way, President Johnson's quoted as saying, "Let the goddamn thing go to the bottom." Nice president. They recalled the air cover that was sent to go help these guys out. You're going to hear, not me talking about it, you're going to hear firsthand from a witness. Most powerful testimony I could provide to you, ladies and gentlemen. So without wasting any more time, let me introduce my special guest for this evening, Mr. Ernie Gallo. Ernie, welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want you to pick up wherever you can, wherever you want, with your story about what happened on that day. And before you even get into it, I want to ask you one simple question. Do you feel that your government, do you feel that the Navy, your branch of the service, which you signed up for, you took that oath to go join to be a sailor, do you feel that they let you and the rest of your shipmates down?
Given the circumstances, when the commander-in-chief provides direct orders to the various commands, yes, I wish the officers would have disobeyed Johnson's orders, but I also understand when the commander-in-chief says jump, you jump. So I'm torn because following the Navy, I spent almost 30 years with the Central Intelligence Agency. So I understand what these fellows went through, giving an order from the commander-in-chief, and you have to make a very serious decision on what you're going to do. Admiral Geiss, who was the commander of the Sixth Fleet, of the Sixth Fleet operations, he was on the U.S.S. America, and when we were under attack, and the U.S.S. Saratoga received our Mayday, they forwarded to the America, and the response was instantaneous. They were launching planes to come to our aid. Our Mayday did not identify who was attacking us, so therefore it could have been the Soviets, it could have been anybody, and they were responding. And they sent word back to the White House that this was happening, and the first time McNamara recalled the aircrafts, and Admiral Geiss was beside himself because being a good naval officer, he's got an American naval ship under attack by unknown perpetrators, and he had to make that decision, and he challenged the order. So he immediately launched planes again, and he made sure that none of the planes were configured with any kind of nuclear weapons whatsoever, and so that he could go back to the White House and say, look, we got a ship under attack. I have to respond. It's the Code of Military Justice compels me to respond. And this time, that's when President Johnson came on the line, and we've confirmed that from various sources. That's exactly what he said. Return the planes to the decks, and I will not have my ally embarrassed. So President Johnson knew it was the Israelis, and that's when he said, I don't care if the ship goes to the bottom. I will not have my ally embarrassed. Anyway, it's something that we've had to live with, and we were abandoned under fire, and we had to get through the night with a torpedo hole in the side of us, but through the grace of God, the ship did not break up. We had 34 killed and 174 wounded, and we did our best to care for the wounded and to keep the ship afloat. At one point, after taking the torpedo, we thought that was it. We were going in the water. However, that did not. Our captain was wise enough to realize that the ship was holding its own, so he rescinded the order to abandon ship. But I mean, I can take you through the sequence of how leading up to that. But essentially, I want to make the point that after going through this and having someone die in your arms, you come away with some insights, spiritual insights, that by all naval accounts, the U.S.S. Liberty should have sunk, but it didn't, and we're here to tell the story for a reason, and that reason is very, very important to the American society. Things are happening in our government that people need to know and realize how important it is that things change, or we're going to be in we're in real trouble, and I worry that my grandkids are not going to see the same America I grew up in.
I agree. We are in real big trouble. And your story is very important, Ernie. Not only the story of the ship, but every sailor on board that ship, every Marine that survived on board that ship deserves to have their stories told. Because everybody, although collectively as a unit, you all came under fire and all had this collective experience, you all also had your own individual experiences, you know. Like you just said, you held someone in your arms as they died. That's a very powerful, very, very powerful thing. I've been there when I've held people's hands when they died as well. I know exactly what you mean. A very powerful thing. And after going through what you guys went through and seeing how that ship was attacked, I agree with you that somebody, somewhere, whatever, and I'm not saying I know anything more than someone was looking out for you guys that day. Because by all accounts, and by any rational, logical thought, you shouldn't have stayed afloat. You should have gone to the bottom of the sea that day. And all of you, not saying, and I'm not saying this because I think this, but I'm saying this by, again, looking at it logically and rationally, how you guys were attacked and how the shape the ship was in. You guys should not have survived, and you did. So there's a reason you survived, and I think it's mainly to get this story out. So I'm going to shut up. I want you to pick it up wherever you want. It's the morning of June 8th, 1967. You're on board the ship. Pick it up, 5 minutes before the attack, right at the beginning of the attack, wherever you want. Where were you on board the ship? And, lead us in.
Okay, well, let me back up a minute and explain. The U.S.S. Liberty was an intelligence ship, and we normally sailed up and down the west coast of Africa. So, and we would make a 4-month cruise, and we just started out our new 4-month cruise. We left port in I think it was May 2nd, and we sailed across the North Atlantic, and we went to Abidjan, Africa. The U.S.S. Liberty was a World War II Victory Hull cargo ship that was converted into an intelligence ship. We were very, very different from most ships you would ever see in that day. It was out of the pages of Buck Rogers. What I'm saying is we had 40 different antennas scattered all over from stem to stern, and with a massive 16-foot dish pointed skyward on it that sat on a pedestal. And the Liberty was one of the most modern intelligence ships that the Navy created, and our communications capability was awesome. The ship was properly marked by American standards, by international standards. One could tell that it was an American ship easily, and also we had our U.S. flag flying every day, as any Navy ship should. That day when we arrived, we were sailing doing about 5 knots, and there was a clear sunny day, which meant that the wind at that speed would have caused the flag to be flying and not limp, as the Israelis claim. So we were very identifiable as American ship. And that leads me into that morning as we arrived, June 8th, off of Port Said, off the coast of the Sinai. That morning we recorded 12 overflights of Israeli reconnaissance aircrafts. These were planes that started early in the morning, flying out to us and taking a look at us, doing whatever, I guess, photographing us. And as I said, 12 different times. One of the planes came in so low that you could see the pilot's face. And he rocked his wings as a sign of friendship. And we felt very comfortable that the Israelis were keeping an eye on us. Now, we knew that the Israelis had taken Sinai, so we knew that the Egyptians were no longer a threat in that area. We also knew that the Israelis had taken out the air forces of Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, so that the Israelis had complete air superiority. The reason we were sent there was really at that time frustrated. It was redundant, and in other words, we really didn't need to be there any longer. And the Joint Chiefs realized that and sent a message telling us to pull back 100 miles. However, that message never got to us. It was one of these errors that occurs in military life on occasion, and I know because I traced the message myself, and it bounced all over the world, just from one mistake after the other, and unfortunately never got to us. So there we were, 13 miles off the coast of the Sinai, and doing a lazy 8, intercepting what we could. And we had, one of the reasons we were there, we had Russian linguists on board, and if there were any aircraft flying, any Syrian or Egyptian aircraft that were flying and with Soviet pilots, this would be something that we needed to know, and so that we could also pass it back to the Israelis, but also it would be important to the president if he wanted to check the Soviets for being involved. as I said, they were not, and the Israelis held all the cards. And I want to paint the picture of what some of the planes saw later on in that morning. One of the things that the guys used to do when they weren't on watch was to sunbathe. So you can imagine these planes coming by and with beach chairs scattered all over the ship and towels of the guys sunbathing. So the first thing is that the Liberty was not a man of war. We did not have the capability of being an aggressive ship like a destroyer or a cruiser. We're not a fighting ship. And the fact that the guys were so relaxed, aggressive and militaristic, I guess we were lacking. So I was a communication technician, petty officer, which meant I was, the Navy would call us a Navy spook. My responsibility was to make sure all the equipment that the other CTs used was working properly. And my area of responsibility was called Radio Research Room Number 2. So that was my general quarters station, and as well as my normal workstation. So I was repairing a unit that morning, and then we broke for lunch, and then immediately followed that the captain had a practice general quarters, and he was drilling us again and again and again because he was concerned about everybody getting on station as quick as possible if something went awry. And so this particular occasion, the captain was very pleased. Captain William McGonigal was very pleased with our quickness to get to general quarters, and he let us know. At the same time, and he wanted to keep us fired up as much as possible. There was something going on shore where there were some guns firing, and he mentioned that if we wanted to see the gun firing, we weren't threatened at all. If we wanted to see this on shore, we could come topside to take a look. So that got my curiosity, and so I decided to take a smoke break and went down to the mess hall to get a Coke, and then I would go topside and smoke a cigarette. Well, I just got my soda in hand when all of a sudden all hell broke loose. The three Israeli jets started to strafe and rocket the ship, and the sound of the attack was just blood curdling. And the general quarters alarm rang, and we all proceeded to our general quarters stations. Now, as I said, my general quarters area was protected by a lot of various metal rooms, and so I didn't. The room that I was in was quite safe. At least initially, it was quite safe. But unfortunately for others, that wasn't the case. So after a number of passes, I believe that the they killed 8 or 9 of the sailors of the 34, and lots of wounded. As I said, there's 174 wounded. We stayed at our general quarters area until we were ordered to leave. Then, before that happened, though, 3 torpedo boats. So after the 3 jets continued to attack, 2 fighter bombers showed up and dropped napalm canisters port and starboard. So then, besides fending for our lives, now we had to put out the fires. And thank God the fires were all topside, and the guys went through and grabbed every CO2 canister
extinguishers. Yeah, thank God you guys had enough of the extinguishers on board the ship to even put the fires out so that it didn't drip down. If it got down into the ship itself, that would have been worse. I'm gonna pause us right there, Ernie, because the break is sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We will be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, my guest, Ernie Gallo, survivor of the U.S.S. Liberty attack, June 8th, 1967. I want to really quick, before we get back into where he was going with the story and where he was, and because I don't want to interrupt him. I want to let him start to paint the picture again for you, because again, talking to him and people like Larry Weaver and all these other survivors, they bring us back in time. We're on board the ship with them. If you just close your eyes and listen to them, you can almost imagine yourself on board with them. So before we get back to that, I want to give him a second. I want to give Ernie 30 seconds, a minute, whatever it takes him. I want you to be able to follow him on Facebook or any other social media he uses, and I want him to be able to give you guys the location of where you can go, either it's a website or Amazon, wherever, to purchase a copy of his book. So, Ernie, where can they follow you on social media, and then where can they get a copy of your book?
I am on Facebook and Ernie Gallo, and also on Lincoln. And you can purchase the book from Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and BooksAMillion.com. And the book is you can either buy the paperback or a regular book, or a ebook that's available. I think the book retails for $20, and the ebook I think is for $10. And it was to write the book was one of these passions that was there, and as I'll explain, I needed to complete my destiny by telling the readers what we've been through and what's happened to this country over the years.
Yeah, and people really need to understand that this is not just some guy trying to make a dollar, selling some book about some made-up story. No, this is a piece of history that you're not told, and this is partially responsible for the police state and this dystopian Orwellian future that we currently live in. And anybody that thinks that we don't live in a police state, come on, they read our emails and they're openly admitting to it, and they have to now, right? So things are messed up, and in order to understand why things are the way they are today, I think I understand that the only possible way to understand the present is to go back and look at the past and try to understand why we are where we are today so we can fix it. And understanding what happened to you and your fellow shipmates on board the Liberty is extremely, extremely important. And I'm going to make you plug the book a few more times before the night is through. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it's called Liberty Injustices, A Survivor's Account of American Bigotry. Go pick up a copy of it. If you have an e-reader, throw it on an e-reader, but I always tell you, get a physical copy. Physical copies, they can delete things. Your battery can die. You can sit with a candle, take a lighter, light a candle, and you can still read Ernie's book if all the power went out. Okay? Get a physical copy. So, getting back into it, Ernie, we're aboard the ship. You guys are being strafed. The Israeli Air Force has just strafed the ship with gunfire and rockets. And now you have 2 fighter bombers coming in, and they drop napalm on the outer decks of the ship. And like you said, thank God, somebody was looking out for you guys that day. And the napalm didn't get into any open vents. It didn't. And this also is actually a testament to the damage control capabilities of your crew and what McGonagall, obviously drilled into you by making you run all these drills constantly. I mean, I would credit that to largely in part saving you guys that day. Although there was, like you said, there had to be some sort of miracle going on because the ship just shouldn't have stayed afloat. But you guys are largely in part, if not completely responsible for that ship staying afloat. I mean, you guys pulled off that day is amazing. So, and we're going to get into that. But you guys are being strafed. They dropped the napalm on you. And you're running around with extinguishers trying to put these fires out. And that's where we got interrupted by the break. So go ahead and pick it up from there.
Yeah, so the ship's and to add to it, we had a 55-gallon drum of gasoline that was lashed down to the bulkhead, and of course the fire got to that, and it blew up and added to the confusion and mayhem. And about that time, 3 motor torpedo boats showed up, and they circled the ship and fired on the firefighters and stretcher bearers, which is against the Geneva Convention. And so they were dealing with that. And then the torpedo boats started dropping torpedoes in the water. These were dumb torpedoes. In other words, the torpedo boat lined itself up with the ship and dropped the torpedoes in the water. And the captain did a great job of monitoring their activity, so he dodged 4 of the torpedoes. Unfortunately, the 5th one struck us on our starboard side. And it struck us in our intelligence compartment. Now, the intelligence compartment was a denied area to the rest of the ship. So there was only 2 entrances. One was through a normal door, and the other one was an escape hatch. But that in itself prevented the ship from sinking because the water was self-contained. Unfortunately, 25 of the 34 were killed by the torpedo blast, and some of the sailors and one Marine survived. They can tell the story of actually experiencing the torpedo coming through the bulkhead, exploding, and they lived through it. And so when we talk about miraculous, that's just, I was one deck above, and I was when the captain told us to prepare for a torpedo attack. I had no idea what to do, so I simply sat down on the deck and braced myself. Well, next thing I know, I was hurtled. I was flying in the air, and came back down on my tailbone. And obviously the lights went out, and the ship lurched violently to port, and then back to starboard and back to port, and it finally came to a 10-degree list, a 9-degree list to starboard, and but we all thought that the ship was going to break apart, and that we would all be in fighting to get out of the ship, and we were still below the waterline. So as the guys came up out of that room, our one surviving Marine refused to come up until he could assure himself that he got any possible person that was trapped in the water out and up into the ladder, and he received a Silver Star for that. And then finally, the water started to come closer to what's called a scupper, and they had to close it. So he was ordered out of the water, and they had to close the scupper. Then all the communication technicians then left the intelligence collecting rooms, and we sort of dispersed from there. Most of us went into a corridor to await further orders, and that's when I encountered our postal clerk, who was very severely wounded, and the corpsman working on him, and he needed help. So another CT and myself tried to do what we could to help our postal clerk, John Spiker. But unfortunately, he eventually died in our arms. The torpedo boats kept firing on the ship, and when I said that some of us dispersed, others went to look for anyone wounded and to help them as much as they could. And they set up a triage in our mess decks, and they used the tables on the mess decks as makeshift beds. The attack lasted about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and at one point the captain passed the order to prepare to abandon ship, and this next item is very, very important to the bigotry that we received later on. Anyway, there were only 3 life rafts that were seaworthy, and they were dropped over the side. These are life rafts that when they hit the water, they had an automatically blow up inflate. Inflate. And the motor torpedo boats came rushing in and machine gunned the life rafts so that they were unusable. So we literally didn't have any means of getting off the ship except for the life vests that we were wearing, which meant that the wounded would never survive. So when the captain realized there was damage control reported that we were not taking on any more water, and that our Boilermakers, our machinists, were able to get the boilers back online again, and so the captain had power, and so the captain realized that we were still seaworthy somewhat. There wasn't a bridge because the Israelis had completely killed the helmsman and destroyed it, but we had aft steering, so the captain through sound phones gave orders and directed the ship to to leave the area. In the meantime, I guess the Israelis thought that the Sixth Fleet planes would be coming, and the torpedo boats left, but 3 helicopters then appeared, and they were filled with Marines, Israeli Marines, and the message was, or the word was passed, prepare to repel boarders, and that of course then added to the mayhem. But thank God that we didn't have any weapons in our hands, because I know I went topside to see what was going on, and I saw the Marines and the helicopters. If I had a gun, I guess I would have shot at the helicopters, and they would have probably returned fire, and I wouldn't be here to tell the story. But just as soon as they saw us come out of come topside, for some reason they left the area, and I'm sure that they were there to take care of anybody else that was still alive. But for some reason, all of it came to they stopped the attack completely, and our captain then had to he wanted to make sure that if the ship did break apart, that we were in deep water so that the Israelis could not retrieve our classified material. So, and as we talked about earlier, the Mayday went to the Sixth Fleet, and they were not allowed to respond, but they did send 2 destroyers to come to our aid as fast as possible, and so they sailed at flank speed all night long, and we rendezvoused with them at 5 o'clock in the morning. And they came aboard, and they helped with our doctor was wounded himself, and we only had with our doctor and our corpsman, and they had their hands full with all the wounded. So their medical people came aboard and provided additional aid to the wounded, and they also sent damage control petty officers that started work on shoring up the bulkheads, so that, in other words, that the bulkheads would not be stressed to the point where they would open up and the ship would have sunk. So everything was being done as much as possible at that point. And later on in the morning, the U.S.S. America came out of the horizon, as well as other Sixth Fleet ships. And they started to send their helicopters out, and they took all of the seriously wounded off the ship, and either they either went to the U.S.S. America or the U.S.S. Little Rock, I believe. And the rest of us that were able, seamen, we did everything that we could to keep the ship going. But then we sailed to Malta, and that took us a good 2 weeks. And during that time, Admiral Kidd came aboard, and as well as other officers. And one of them, one of the officers was Captain Ward Boston. Admiral Kidd he became the senior member of the Navy Court of Inquiry, and he did something that was very unusual. He gathered the crew, and he took off his stars and talked to us like any sailor, and that he sympathized with us and understood what we'd just been through and all of that. Then put his stars back on, and then laid the law down, and that is that we will never talk about this ever again. You'll never talk about it even to your family or fellow sailors. You'll never. In other words, this was the beginning of the gag order to make sure that the story was squelched. When we arrived in Malta, we went into dry dock, and a canvas cover was placed over the hull while the water was let out, because there were still dead bodies in that room. As I said, 25 of the sailors were killed by the torpedo blast, and so those bodies were still there. There were a couple that did float out. That were we had a Navy tug that followed us, and they managed to get the two bodies, but so most of the bodies were still there, and we're in a foreign port, and this was our classified area, and everybody the big concern was our classified material would be spilled out onto the decks or into the holding area of the dry dock. So the canvas was kept there until all the water was drained out, and then all of the CTs were ordered to go into that area and pick up any and all debris and place them in canvas bags. For me, this was more emotional than the attack itself, because in picking up the debris, we were picking up parts of our friends' bodies, parts, fingers, toes. It was the worst thing that I've ever experienced. Plus the fact that the decks were very precarious. The torpedo had ruptured one of our fuel tanks, so that there was both a water and oily mixture that corroded the entire area, covered the entire area. So our footing was very slippery, and every movement was precarious. But it was something that they felt had to be done because of all the classified material and devices that were in our compartment. Following that, we were given orders. We flew back to the States. All the CTs were flown back to the States and given orders, and we all went in our own direction. There were few that were left behind that finally sailed after the ship was patched up. The Israelis had put over 820 penetrations into the ship, to give you some idea of the munitions that were used that day. I mean, this was a turkey shoot for them. We couldn't fight back, and all we could do was help the wounded. But they were doing their best to shoot the ship up. I mean, this was target practice for them. Easy, threatening target practice. I said, only the grace of God we survived. And the Navy Court of Inquiry that occurred at Malta was something that was held very quickly and was put together very quickly. And the White House had given orders to Admiral Kidd and Captain Ward Boston. Captain Ward Boston was the lawyer for the Navy Court of Inquiry, that they were to come to the conclusion that the attack was accidental, and that we did nothing wrong. So therefore, there would be no court-martials. So there'd be no story that lingered on or for anything untoward. So they could bury the story as fast as possible. And no Israelis were interviewed. The Navy Court of Inquiry report then was taken to London. The officer in charge of all of the Navy in that area was Admiral McCain, the father of Senator McCain, and his lawyer was a Captain Merlin Starring. Captain Starring was given the report to review as normal procedure to get his approval to be given to Admiral McCain, and then Admiral McCain would sign it, and off it would go to Washington. But Captain Starring had a problem with the report, and that he immediately came to the conclusion, as he read through it, that the substance of the report did not support the conclusion that the attack was accidental.
Ernie, I'm gonna cut us off right there because the break is sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. When we come back, I'm going to pick up right here at this point, and it's very synchronistic. It's almost like Ernie was reading my mind. While he was talking, I was saying out loud to myself, well, I know McCain's father was involved with sending the ship over there to begin with, and then in the cover-up afterwards. And I was going to mention it, and 10 seconds later he did. So stay right there, ladies and gentlemen. You don't want to miss a second of this. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. It is May 29th, 2014. Tonight, I am discussing the attack on the U.S.S. Liberty. And make sure you tune in next week, next Friday, because I'll be having another survivor on. This story can't be told enough. If I could get every crew member that was still surviving on, I would dedicate an entire month's worth of shows to each night having a different survivor on and getting their over the overall story, but their actual experience, because everybody had a collective experience, but they each individually had their own experiences, and they're all just as powerful as the next one. They're all different than each other, as in the story of the Liberty itself is the same, but their personal experience, what they went through, is a little bit different, slightly different for everybody, yet equally as powerful across the board. Very, very powerful stuff. I mean, I could sit and bloviate all night about the attack and this and that. That's why I'd rather let you listen to an actual survivor. And not only did he survive the attack, not only did Ernie and the survivors, the rest of the surviving crew, survive the attack, but they also survived the cover-up and personal attacks. Like I said, Ernie can pontificate on this, but if you go to the ADL's website and you look up the U.S.S. Liberty, his name is on there as being anti-Semitic. Oh, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy because he speaks truth to power about what happened to him and his shipmates. And then afterwards, how they were gagged, and mistreated. And you heard him in the beginning. He's still, he understands because he worked for the CIA, he was in the military. He understands how the just following orders things works with the lower levels. But that doesn't give the people the high, to me, even the lower level people following orders, that bothers me. But the people above them are the ones that are the real scum. The people the very, very high ups, the people that were more worried about their careers, even the lower level guys. It's just, and this is not Ernie talking, this is me. It just irritates me as a sailor, as a veteran, that these guys were mistreated the way they were. And by the way, if I remember correctly, and I'll let Ernie pontificate on this as well, but I believe the Liberty still holds the record as being the most decorated ship in Navy history, meaning, amount of awards the sailors on board got. And if I remember correctly, McGonagall got the Congressional Medal of Honor, but it was all done in secret, hush hush. When did you ever see a Congressional Medal of Honor given to somebody in hush hush? You see the president giving them out all the time, and the news media is there, and there's articles about it. Anyway, I'll let Ernie get into it. So when we went to break, he was discussing the whitewash, the cover-up. They came back. They're in Malta. They're not, ships in dry dock, but it hasn't been that long since the attack. And they're already separating people from the ship and from each other, sending them all over the place. And now you have this whitewash happening, which, by the way, included John McCain's father, who was also in the command structure that sent the ship over to where it was to begin with. So perhaps maybe that's a conflict of interest that he was involved in the investigation. Just saying, because maybe he would cover up certain facts to cover up certain things, perhaps. Just saying. Just saying. You can do all the research yourself. Just saying. Anyway, back to Ernie. And before we get back into it, Ernie, take a second and plug your book again, because it's really important that people purchase the book. Hard copies, if possible. Get the ebook, but plug the book so the listeners can get a copy of it.
The name of the book is Liberty and Justices, a Survivor's Account of American Bigotry. And you can buy the book at Amazon.com, BooksAMillion.com, and BarnesandNoble.com. And I believe the book retails for $19.95 for the paperback. I think it's $25 for the hardcover, and I believe it's $9.95 for the ebook version. I had to write the book to get this off my chest in order to so I could live through my later years. Just something I had to get out, and I would hope you can read it and light a fire under you and this story. This U.S.S. Liberty story is a microcosm to a much bigger problem with our country.
Well said, and 100% agreed to. So let's get back into it. You guys are the ship's in dry dock in Malta, and right away, this quote unquote inquiry is actually a whitewash, right? And there's actually been quotes from admirals saying that the whole thing was a whitewash.
Well, yeah, the guys gave testimony under oath, and some of that testimony was about the machine gunning of our life rafts and the machine gunning or shooting at our stretcher bearers and firefighters. All of that was supposedly recorded. Well, as we found out later on, that all of that was stripped. Anything that was negative towards the attackers was stripped from the report. And as I said, the report also had to indicate that that we did our job as best we could, so that there could be no court-martials. And so the report then left Malta and went to London to be reviewed by another lawyer, Captain Merlin Starring. and he had an issue with it immediately. When they found out he had a problem, it was taken from him, so he never did sign the report, and it was taken to Admiral McCain for his signature, and rushed off to Washington, and where it was further massaged by two White House lawyers to make it as I guess as less contentious as possible. Now, the fact that the White House got involved with the Navy Court of Inquiry is interference at the highest level. If you say that the military have some rights under the Code of Military Justice, our rights then were violated because of this political stunt that was taking place to absolve Israel of any wrongdoing. And what that has done to us for as on the onset for the oncoming years was that our government could safely say that the attack was accidental, and therefore, anytime the crew would say anything to the contrary, then we must have some political agenda in mind. Now, with the gag order in mind, no one said anything about the attack. And it wasn't until 1979 when our division officer, James Ennis, thank God, had written a book. And he did a lot of research to gather up all the facts that he could possibly find and get it down in a book called The Assault on the Liberty. And he got it published, as I said, in 1979. Well, what that did for the crew, we started to, there are some of us who kept in touch with our friends, our closer friends, and that pool then came together, and they had a 15th year reunion, and they formed the U.S.S. Liberty Veterans Association, which I am currently the president of. And we are a 501c3 organization, and our whole purpose is to get the truth. Our mission statement is to tell the truth about the attack. And because of that, the backlash from the Israeli supporters, based on our government stand, is that we are anti-Semitic, and that's where the bigotry begins. Now, I'm going to now talk about some of the events that have taken place over the years that creates this bigotry and the turmoil that we've been through, and also keep in mind that the U.S.S. Liberty is the most decorated naval ship for a single engagement. And that's a kind of a curious point, too, because the handlers of the situation they wanted to call the attack accidental in the worst way. Now, if it's an accident, that means the Navy doesn't give out any medals. It's only a combat situation where you're awarded medals. But thank God the Pentagon dug their heels in enough where they realized the heroic events that took place on that ship, where the people they deserve all the medals. For instance, there's just 208 Purple Hearts alone that were given out. The captain received the Congressional Medal of Honor, not by President Johnson at the White House. It was at a low-level affair at the Washington Navy Yard by the Secretary of the Navy, gave him his Medal of Honor. That's the only one in the history of the medal that I know I should say, more current history that has not come from the president. But there was, of course, there was no fanfare. There was no media there, and that was done very quietly. Now, some of the bigotry that I talk about here, and one of the instances of the situation, once again, this business of that it was accidental. There were two of the officers that were killed. Our executive officer, Philip Armstrong, and one of our officers, Lieutenant Stephen Toth, were Annapolis graduates. There is a wall of honor in Bancroft Hall at Annapolis, where if you are killed in action, your name is placed on the wall. Well, their names were not going to be placed on the wall because the attack was accidental. Well, thank God this drew the ire of Admiral Thomas Moore, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at one point. And he would not hear that, and he saw to it that those names got placed on Bancroft Hall. Admiral Thomas Moore was a Liberty supporter. Thank God he came to our aid because one of the things that he did was he pulled together some senior military officers and ambassador and in other words, made up a blue ribbon panel where they investigated the U.S.S. Liberty and provided some facts that was eventually placed into the congressional record. And that brings me to Congress, what should have happened in Congress. There is, when our Constitution was written, one of the things that was captured was a instruction that the House of Representatives had to investigate any Navy ship that was attacked in peacetime. Now, they have done that in every single case except one, the U.S.S. Liberty. They wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Now, you now start to have to ask yourself, now, what is going on that our country would now want to, let's say, hide under their desks when it comes to this affair, and that's when you really get into the seriousness of the event. My point is, since Congress would not investigate the attack, and they're compelled to under our Constitution, they have abdicated their responsibilities. Now, what that means is that if a president wants to go to war, and our nation is founded on a tripartite form of government, where of the three legs of government, legislative, executive, and judicial, they form checks and balances, so that if a chief executive was up to no good, hopefully the legislative branch or the Senate and the House would do their best to make sure that the Constitution is upheld. So if Congress then hides behind their desks because they don't want to look bad to their constituents that may be Israeli supporters, or to go against, dare I say, AIPAC, then they've abdicated their responsibilities, and we get into the situation that we're in right now in the Middle East. And therein lies why the Liberty story is so important. In other words, the analysis of the microcosm starts to break out into at various levels of what needs to be rectified. Now, if I can continue on explaining what this means, what the impact is. In January of 2004, the State Department wanted to have a expose of all of the 6-Day War, the Arab-Israeli War, and it was to make sure that America then received all the facts about what America's responsibility was in that war. And it was an attempt. It wasn't really to talk about the 6-Day War. It was to make sure that the U.S.S. Liberty, the fact that the U.S.S. Liberty attack was accidental. It almost worked. It almost worked. They had representatives from the CIA and the State Department giving facts and explaining to the nth degree. And it all came back to the attack on the U.S.S. Liberty. And when it came to the speaker, James Bamford, who was a member of that group, James Bamford was going to read an affidavit from Captain Ward Boston, and it really torpedoed the entire mission that the State Department had in mind, because Captain Ward Boston, as I mentioned before, was the counselor for the Navy Court of Inquiry. And after all these years, he decided to come out of the closet and tell the truth about the attack from what Admiral Kidd and him had seen. Unfortunately, when he did this, Admiral Kidd had passed away. So anyway, but he gave us a sworn affidavit, and we also have him on video, where he explains that after listening to the testimony of the U.S.S. Liberty crew, they knew for sure that the attack was deliberate, and that those items, for instance, the shooting of the life rafts and so on, was eliminated from the Navy Court of Inquiry, and he very explicitly indicates that things were written as per the White House orders. So I explain this in my book and cover the details of that. So in 2005, during the Bush administration, the Bush administration was afraid that the GIs coming back from Iraq may have seen war crimes, and they wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to report the war crimes, so that if anything happened that needs to be, that somebody should be tried or it should be looked into. They set up a scenario where all you have to do is provide the information to this office, and they will take it from there. Well, we jumped on this, and we filed a war crimes report on June 8th, 2005, and we followed the Pentagon procedure to the hilt, and then nothing happened. So we queried them as to why we thought we had a very we have people that could testify under oath that these war crimes occurred. They said that it's not necessary because the Navy Court of Inquiry of 1967 investigated the attack. So therefore, nothing has to be done. Well, one of the individuals, as I said, that was involved was a Captain Merlin Starring. He eventually became the Navy's Judge Advocate General from 73 to 75. And Merlin Starring was beside himself that this Navy Court of Inquiry is the document that the government uses to throw in our face that, that the attack was accidental and that we must be lying or whatever. And so he went to at that time, he went to the current Judge Advocate General of the Navy, and he provided him a document where he methodically identified all the issues, the problems with the Navy Court of Inquiry that should have, in other words, if other things that should have taken place because 34 Americans were killed, ship was taken off the line, that there were very serious items, things that needed to be included that did not occur in the Navy Court of Inquiry. And when he finished, and with they reviewed his comments, and he, one of the points he made was, this is a blight on the Navy JAG that needs to be rectified. So, he's pleading with them to do another Navy Court of Inquiry. So the current, I don't have his name, but the current, that at the time, the Judge Advocate General came back and said, "You realize, Admiral, that if we do this, it'll be labeled anti-Semitic." Now, I'd like everybody to think about that for a moment. That here, this is political correctness working at its best. We also come to find out that the Navy was going to launch a new type of ship called the Littoral Combat Ship, LCS, and the Navy Times had indicated that they were going to use patriotic names to kick this new ship off.
Ernie, I'm gonna pause this right there because the break is sneaking up. But I promise, ladies and gentlemen, we are gonna pick it up right there because I have a feeling I know where Ernie is going with this. Do not leave. Do not turn the radio off. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back in 3 short, quick minutes. Go grab a copy of Ernie's book. Get a cup of coffee. And then get back. 3 minutes, you can do both. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Final segment of tonight's live edition. DTRH. Hanging out with Ernie Gallo tonight, survivor of the U.S.S. Liberty attack. Again, if you are not familiar with it, go educate yourself. Look up Loss of Liberty on YouTube. There's also a British documentary from the BBC about it. It's like 45 minutes long. I do not remember it, but if you look up U.S.S. Liberty on YouTube, or even on Vimeo, I'm sure it'll come up and you can just watch the documentaries. Actually, if you go to federaljack.com and you go to the video section, or if you just type in USS Liberty, the video should pop up. I have them posted in multiple articles and stuff on there too as well. But either way, you can go find it. And actually, I think there's even under the Reality of War section, if I remember correctly, the downloadable archive section on Federal Jack. Under the Reality of War section, I think it's either there or under the miscellaneous video. It's one of those two. The Reality of War or miscellaneous video section. The the videos, both of them, the documentary and the Loss of Liberty, are there. Go download them and watch them, pass them out, whatever. Before we get back into it, and I'm going to try to fit in a couple questions for Ernie too that I have for him. I'm going to let him get back into the comment about the Liberty, the U.S.S. Liberty, the ship itself that he served on, and then the littoral combat ships that he was about to bring up. But first, I want him to plug his book again really quick, because it's important, ladies and gentlemen, that you go buy it, physical copy, and spend the extra $10 and get the ebook if you want, if you have an ebook reader. But get the physical copy. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. So, Ernie, where can they get it again, the book?
Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and BooksAMillion.com.
Awesome. And again, ladies and gentlemen, the title is Liberty, Injustices, A Survivor's Account of American Bigotry. One more time, Liberty, Injustices, A Survivor's Account of American Bigotry. So, getting right back into it for time purposes, Ernie, and I know we discussed, I wanted to ask you a few things, but you were telling us about when the littoral combat ships, these new ships that the Navy has been toying with creating, and they actually did make two different variations of them, and they've been testing them out. And you were getting into when they were naming them, and then we got cut off by the break. So go ahead and pick it up from there.
Right. The Navy Times had indicated that the LCS-2 was going to be named U.S.S. Liberty. That lasted about 2 months, and now we have U.S.S. Freedom and U.S.S. Independence, and they've changed now. I mean, they will not use patriotic names any longer because it sidesteps the U.S.S. Liberty, obviously. This is political correctness operating at its best. Therefore, the Navy can't name U.S.S. Liberty because it might offend the Israeli supporters, and of course, if it would bring to light possibly people looking for information about why the USS Liberty is the most decorated naval ship in a single engagement, that sort of thing. So, the crew of the USS Liberty was very much offended. And this is another slap in the face to the most decorated naval ship for a single engagement, and the honor that would go with that if they named another ship USS Liberty. That's a really sad day for the Navy that has occurred. And especially for the CTs, the communication technicians. Now they're called cryptologic technicians because this is a group that has heroically has made a name for themselves in the Navy of being exceptional sailors as far as being mission oriented. So I'm very, very proud of all the CTs, even today.
And weren't those the guys that were actually braving the incoming Israeli fire from the fighter jets, trying to string up wires that as they were getting shot down, as the communications were getting shot and torn to pieces by bullets and rocket fire? These guys were climbing up and trying to string up lines so you guys could get an SOS out, and a lot of them were cut down in the line of fire. Correct?
I wish I could take that was not the CTs. That was an ET who received a silver star for that. But yeah, that was an ET, electronic technician, that was part of our division. But we didn't have an antenna to transmit on, and he found one that wasn't shot down and ran a transmission line out to the antenna, and that was the antenna that we were able to get our Mayday out on. I'll continue about the bigotry that we've suffered.
Yeah, well, that goes in line with one of the questions I wanted to, actually two of the questions I wanted to ask you. A, the repercussions that you've suffered from it. But the other question is, and I'm sure the listeners are probably seething to ask this by now, why do you think that you guys have been put through this meat grinder afterwards, let alone the meat grinder that the Israelis unloaded on you? Why do you think they attacked the ship? And then I've heard a couple different theories. I've heard that they were trying, because we almost did come close to perhaps engaging Egypt, and that would have been bad. And I've heard that, well, perhaps that's why they did it, to try to drag us into a war. But the further I've researched into it, I've seen that you guys might have witnessed, or at least Israel might have thought that you guys, because you were a spy ship, might have witnessed them committing war crimes during the 6 Day War, and that's maybe why they attacked you. So, but as someone that was there, as a survivor of this, and I'm sure as you've investigated this probably deeper than most people, why do you think, or why do you know that they attacked you that day?
Okay, well, we now have a CIA cable that identifies that Mariusz Dayan, who was the defense minister, was the person that gave the order to attack the U.S.S. Liberty. And the reason, until the Israelis fess up to the details, or our government finally comes out, because they know exactly the reason. So it's a hypothesis, I guess. But you go back and follow the sequence of events. The June 5th, the Israelis started the war, and by June 8th, when we arrived, we were now an impediment to their war plan. What I mean by that is that by June 8th, the Soviets were really climbing the wall, because two of their client states, Syria and Egypt, was getting their butts kicked, and they were very fearful that the Israelis were going to invade Cairo and Damascus. So Premier Brezhnev told Johnson that that the Soviets were ready to get into the war, and they had paratroopers ready to go. So, in other words, he was telling Johnson, you better get the Israelis to come to the peace table, or else. And we also found out that since then we found out that the Russians had Soviet subs in the Mediterranean with nuclear weapons, as well as 40 subs off the east coast of the United States. The war plan included taking the Golan Heights, and by June 8th that hadn't happened yet. So now they had to move troops out of the Sinai to go over to the Syrian border. It's my contention that the ship got attacked because we could be intercepting the details of them moving troops over to the Syrian border, and they did not want us to know that they were going to take the Golan Heights June 9th, and they did. Following that, that's when Israel sued for peace. So we were an impediment to their war plan. They knew exactly what they wanted to do before they will sit down at the peace table, and they pulled it off.
Do you think the theory of you guys picking up any interceptions about war crimes being committed has any weight at all, or is that just a theory?
Jim Bamford, in his book, The Body of Secrets, in chapter 13, he talks about the Liberty and the Liberty incident, and his contention from his investigation was that, yes, we know that the war crime did take place, where the Israelis had Egyptian prisoners of war, and they killed them in a mass grave. And Bamford suspects that. I mean, that's another possibility that they were concerned that we could see. We were close enough to pick up UHF communications inland, and that may, in other words, they're walkie-talkies, okay, operating in the UHF band. We would have been able to pick that up. And that's another possibility. But the theory that it was to bring is to make it, if the ship would have sunk, that we would have thought that the Egyptians had done it, really doesn't hold any water, because you have to, as I said, you have to look at what the situation was in June 8th, that the Egyptians didn't have the capability to do that whatsoever. They didn't have an air force, and they really didn't have the Navy much to speak of. The Egyptians couldn't have done it.
Yeah, but I do think the other two actually probably hold more weight. The communications, you guys intercepting their plans, plus war crimes. That actually makes more sense. And you guys were a road bump, or a roadblock, I should say. You were a rather large roadblock in their plans if you picked up their communications, because then Johnson would know that they were about to invade the Golan Heights, and they didn't want anybody knowing that. And look where we are today. We're still getting involved in people's backyards where we shouldn't, for foreign policy that is not ours. It belongs to somebody else.
Right. It could have been Maish Dayan, who was known to be a cowboy, was to stick it in our face that, in other words, there was a lot of pressure to bring Israel to the peace table, like I said, on June 8th, and it was like, you're not going to tell us what's going to happen. This is our war, and so you stay out of it, and handle the Soviets. Make sure they stay out of the war, and that's all they cared about. And
it's very powerful that. It's just very powerful that, the commander-in-chief came on and said, no, turn those planes around. I don't care. I don't want to embarrass an ally. That's a very powerful statement about, even if you don't think that Israel has a big hand in our foreign policy, okay, you could just remove that for a second and think about the fact that the commander-in-chief of our military, who's supposed to make sure that, he commands them, but as their leader, he's supposed to look after them. That's what you would think, right? He's supposed to make sure that if we get attacked, they would be taken care of and defended. And yet, he doesn't care, because he doesn't, even if, again, take the politics out of it. I don't want to offend an ally. What kind of an attitude is that? But Johnson was kind of a psychopath. He was involved in other things. And that's not Ernie saying that. If anybody hears this and wants to attack Ernie, that's me saying it, the host of the radio show. LBJ was a psychopath, okay? The fact that he was willing to let these guys get shot up and sent to the bottom is evidence of that. But I'm sure people would argue that, you're disparaging a president. Right, a really bad president, an evil man. And if you followed LBJ's stuff all the way back to his first injection into politics, you'll see how evil he was. But anyway, I digress. So, Ernie, we got about 10 minutes here. I have two questions I want to ask you really quick. First, and I'm sure this will be easy to answer. When you were in the CIA, and I don't want you to give any information out about that would incriminate you or anything, but when you were in the CIA, your time in, did you ever get a chance to find out anything deeper about what our government knew, pertaining to the attack on the Liberty? Or were you, kind of blocked from even mentioning the word liberty at all?
after 1979, I found it easier to be able to talk about the liberty, obviously because the book had gotten published. But I had, as a staff officer, I did submit a Freedom of Information request internal to the CIA on everything that they had on the U.S.S. Liberty attack. And I got a stack of documents that wouldn't quit. Unfortunately, a lot of the documents were redacted, almost to the point where they're unintelligible. Even though I was a staff officer and had all the appropriate clearances, the way the CIA operates, as well as any other intelligence organization, there's a thing called need to know. And so if you don't have a need to know, then you shouldn't be asking about it, or you shouldn't be given any information. So they gave me as much information, I guess, as they wanted. And at the time, there was still, and this is the funny thing about this whole incident. If you say that the attack was accidental, then why is so much of the material still classified today? I mean, we constantly are submitting Freedom of Information requests. There's two taking place right now, and to the CIA, and yet they, if it's accidental, then what's the problem? Why not give us all the information about the attack? Obviously, we must be right that the attack was deliberate.
And then again, that goes back to the question as to why, and that's why I think it's whitewashed so much the way it is, and they don't even want to touch it. And like you said, they went around. I mean, they renamed a ship. And not only is it an insult to you guys, but they did that because they don't even want the name brought up. Because then when someone go, Liberty, wonder if that ship's ever had a name before, and then they Google U.S.S. Liberty, and poof, what's this? What?
Yeah.
A Navy ship was attacked by a foreign government, and we did nothing? What? That's why they have to go around it the way they do, and I think that's why it's whitewashed, and why you guys are labeled the survivors of an attack. Again, the most decorated ship in Navy history from a single engagement, and yet these guys that are decorated out the yin-yang, Congressional Medal of Honor for Captain McGonigal, and yet your guys are anti-Semitic because you speak truth to power. Gotta wonder why.
Well, there's an 11th commandment that's gripping this country right now, and that is, thou shalt not criticize or condemn Israel or their supporters. And then when you break that commandment, then you pay the price of being labeled anti-Semitic, or things happen to you like you're not allowed to come to American Legion convention because you're critical of Israel, I was a member of the St. Augustine Navy League, and I was kicked out of that council because the new president at the time was an Israeli supporter, and he did not want to hear any critical words in my mouth about the attack. So it goes on and on and on. They're as passionate as I am about getting the truth told. These people are passionate to instill in your mind that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and they deserve that we should protect them. And as far as I'm concerned, all hogwash. And the other thing that we found out over the years, that our press is our media is controlled press. That we don't have free press in this country anymore, and we've seen it operating at its best, where reporters have obviously wanted to tell our story, and as soon as their handlers got a hold of them, they said, "There's no way that you're going to put that story out there about the Liberty."
And look, I'll tell you, as somebody who's I've said this before, as somebody whose grandmother, she bore the tattoo on her forearm for her life. She was rounded up, and she was in camp, and they were able to, by bribing and proving that there was Catholics in the family, they were able to get her out, but they had to pretty much sell everything they owned too and bribe everybody and their mother. But she still bore the tattoo on her arm for the rest of her life, and she witnessed atrocities and everything else. My mother, Jewish woman, I don't find it anti-Semitic to talk about the foreign policy of Israel controlling a lot of our government, directing our foreign policy to a large extent. I mean, the Iraq War, who benefited from that but Israel? Really? We didn't benefit from it. Well, and China, because they get the oil now from Iraq. But anyway, I digress. It's not anti-Semitic at all to talk about this. I don't think you're disparaging my grandmother because you are telling the truth about being attacked by the nation state of Israel. That's a game. That's the term anti-Semitic. If you want the American version, ladies and gentlemen, you know how when you question the president, you're racist right now? Same thing, except this is just an ongoing thing. They constantly use it. They've even have had members of the Knesset, former members of the Knesset, come out and say that it's just something they use, okay, to shut people up. And it's like almost like an ad hominem attack, basically. It's a logical fallacy. So you can't deny what happened. So I just throwing that out there, I don't consider it anti-Semitic. You're not saying, oh my God, I think every Jewish person in the world knew this was going to happen. You're saying a select few people inside the government chose to do this, and just like our military, they follow orders. I mean, I know there's been some talk about that an Israeli pilot radioed back and said, "No, I see an American flag," and they said, "Doesn't matter, fire on board the ship," or pretty much it's your ass. And again, it comes to a point where then that person has to make a choice: do I follow command, or do I violate command, and then I'm going to have to suffer the repercussions? And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make a moral judgment. I'm saying that's what happens, and then that person makes a decision, and then, the rest is history. But, all I'm saying is that telling the truth about what happened that day is not anti-Semitic. You're not bashing anybody. You're just telling the truth. And it needs to be spoken. It needs to be told. Okay, the problem is you guys can't even mention the word liberty anymore, or else you're shh, you can't say that. That's ridiculous. We got about 2 minutes left before the end of the show. Final thoughts, Ernie? Anything you want to throw out there?
Well, I don't wish the government of Israel any ill, but I really would like your listeners to pay attention to what Congress is doing or what Congress is not doing. When your congressman makes trips to Tel Aviv, pay attention to how many times that congressman goes to Tel Aviv. It's amazing the numbers of congressmen that make that trip to Israel. Israel can do whatever they need to do, but our country, our politicians, need to start making decisions that are the best for America and not for anybody else. And that goes up and down all of the spectrum of subjects that they have to deal with. Enough is enough. The parties have to abandon their stands and their pettiness and make the best decisions for America. And you can't do that if you're constantly being in fear of AIPAC or any other organization that is ready to condemn you for going against something that Israel wants to do.
I agree. I got to cut us off, Ernie, because we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Let me spill the beans in my heart and heart and soul about what we need to do. This country is in trouble.
I agree. We are in trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to go purchase his book. Again, one more time, really quick. Liberty, Injustices, A Survivor's Account of American Bigotry. Look it up on Amazon. Purchase it. Look up the U.S.S. Liberty Incident. Knowledge is power. As I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. I will be live again tomorrow night. I will see you all then. Until then, I love you all. We are out of here.